Is it John?
I'm representing Jocelyn, I'm her husband.
Yeah, she has to go to Yep.
Okay, so before we begin, I'd like to say that Lilani could not make it tonight. She had an emergency. We hope everything's okay. And that I want to advise everybody that the Board of Trustees has a consensus that these meetings should go no longer than 90 minutes. And we want to try and keep that if we can. It's not a directive, it's a suggestion. And that everybody could help by only speaking when recognized by the chair. The chair. And this is the chair.
All right, I'd like to see if there's a motion to call the meeting to order.
Making a motion to call the meeting to order.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Come on.
Aye.
Who's taking minutes?
I am.
Oh, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
And
You do October.
I know. I'm working on it. All right, so look, we have we got this and the agenda, we got, all right, so we have quite a number of folks here, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Now, you said there was going to be other people that were going to be coming for.
Do you have anybody else that was planning to come later? So I think it was just one that got caught up in work, so we can slide ahead.
Okay, so let us, we'll advance here in the old business, but if we can, and Neil, how are you on time, Neil?
And here you go.
Can you hear us, Neil?
He's connected audio.
We're here for something different.
Okay.
Looks like you're connected, Neil.
Brian?
Say something.
They're all together. And Mr. Zerlo was here for a separate item.
And what was it you here for?
He had sent an email earlier today.
You sent him a message.
About the illegal parking,
Yeah.
correct, white pickup truck.
That's one of them.
Okay,
Is there a link that I can share with for the meeting?
yeah, it's on the website.
Actually, I didn't see it posted on the website.
Is there a way that we can, if you go to,
Neil, can you hear us?
is there any way that you can get the, go to?
Do you have a cell phone number?
All right, while we're clicking around, let's go ahead and jump into these new business items. The first one is New Street by Old White Plains Road, removing of parking. Is anyone here from the community for that particular issue? New Street.
It was an email sent by Patty to Patricia Tripoli.
Well, no, that link was for the host. That's for my account, so I could start this.
But Dan had the actual picture of New Street and the issue with the parking on New Street.
Okay.
Yeah, but you have to be invited to.
Get any information on this?
Yeah, we did. There was emails. It was a while back, probably back in October.
On the agenda.
Yeah.
Copy that into an email if you want to send.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. I'm gonna email.
Someone knows.
Spent a little too much time on Zoom, you think?
Yeah, Johnson, Jocelyn. Langus, Langus.
Oh, what?
Yes. Gmail.com. Yeah, thank you very much.
Right.
Super.
There we go.
Okay. So can we go back to the new street? Old White Plains Road, removing parking space.
You can actually see it, I think, as we're talking, it's actually easier to see from the I guess East Old White Plains Road intersection. I think it's just a matter of this car being parked so closely to the intersection that a car's making a tighter turn from East Old White Plains Road. So I think it's just to allow for the turning radius.
It is, it's pretty much the same habit through the corridor.
Okay.
And when church is in function or not, and the car is parked in that area, it forces you again to pull around it and put you into the middle of the road to continue.
So there was a lot of reconfiguring of those streets recently with over there.
No, not yet.
Yeah.
We changed directions of something. Yeah, that's what I meant. Did that impact parking though?
No, it's the
Just change the direction of the streets.
for pickup.
Yeah, I think this is more of a distinct issue, unrelated to the school, traffic. So-
Although I think even during school, there's always a car parked there, I feel like. Because there's teachers don't have enough parking, there's. It's like, I don't,
Is it a legal spot now or is it illegal right now?
It's legal.
Yeah, you can, yeah, unless it's, the only thing that would be illegal is you can't park within 30 feet of a stop sign. On the street where the stop sign is. So like, for instance, you couldn't park in front of that stop sign on East Old White Plains Road, but around the corner you can.
But which does happen on the other end of
Yeah.
Old Plains Road. But this does, there have been vehicles hit, people have. Been sideswiped. It's an issue. It's a growing issue with the overparking. Without,
it's hard to see the cars coming up
Right.
when you're stopped and turning.
Right, the ones that are coming off a new street,
Mhm.
making the right end of Old White Plains Road. Right.
and it brings both cars head on. It forces you into the middle of the road. So I would move to remove that parking of that one parking spot to ensure safety and the crosswalk
Right.
and,
Is that a motion, Laura?
I make a motion to remove one parking spot on New Street in the corner of Old White.
Yeah,
Plains
so
Road.
we would just say, from 20 feet from the corner, because that's approximately what we considered a parking space.
20 feet before.
Yeah.
Okay, all those, is there a second? A second. Okay, Rob, thank you. Is there, all those in favor? Any opposed? All right, so we'll make a recommendation to remove the parking spot 20 feet away from the corner of New Street and White Plains Road. All right, we're making good progress. Number two, and there's a short agenda, which means that we're gonna get to you guys here pretty quick.
Great.
Because usually it's like 50 things on the new agenda. So today was your night. All right, so corner of West and Rose Avenue. There is a desire and interest for a stop sign. Is anyone
We talked
from
about this earlier,
previously?
early last year.
Okay, and there's nobody here from the community? Is there anybody on Zoom?
Nope.
Okay,
We talked about this about a year ago. I used to live on West
And
Street.
it's
and
on
we
the-
did-
it's on, yeah.
We decided against it.
So we decided against it.
Speed sensor there.
Recommended police enforcement.
Right. It was kind of a.
Um,
good
It's on
deal.
here,
can you point to what page it's on?
last page.
Oh, last
Very last item, West Street. Although it might have been a different corner, because they were requesting the.
I think
They got a whole street.
I think they requested an all-way stop, so.
They never identified the street. I remember.
But this is the
They
same-
didn't know it was
the
West
same
Street. They
thing.
never identified Rose Avenue.
That's
Almost.
Rose Lane, I believe.
Rose Lane
Yeah.
Rose Avenue was on the other side.
Rose Avenue's before the white, yeah.
on the right side.
That's right. Yeah,
I mean, we talked about this.
That's Rose
But
Avenue.
along, there were several stop signs.
But this one, when there was a
That
slow
whole-
down curve sign
Right.
and Rose Avenue is so close to West Street, they wouldn't be doing that much. So I'm not I just don't know how that got into new business and we sent it in. I didn't see any information on
I
it.
didn't either.
And it's showing case closed.
Yeah, so I saw I got another email on it.
Right.
That's why I put it on there, at the last minute on Friday. All right, so
Do we know if there were more police enforcement? Do we have any data?
is,
I don't see anyone from PD in the Zoom. So. Yeah, there's no attendees at this point, just us and Neil. So,
You don't know where it came from, whether, how it got on.
yeah, so it came from an email. Let's see here.
It was closed.
Yeah.
if you want, I can draft a letter for you if you want to respond, saying that it was looked at last year. I think that it was recommended for some additional monitoring enforcement from the police department.
Right, they put a speed sensor on.
Oh, they did, okay,
They did at one point.
okay.
I don't know if anyone sent a letter to the complainant that it was closed. That might be the issue.
Okay, I can draft a letter.
You don't have enough. to do anything.
It was Lauren Picone Moore,
Hmm.
That-
Yeah, the
and
last-
it was sent on the 21st of December. And she was following up that she had talked to Brian a little bit about it, former chair, and that she was following up to see if it was going to be on the next agenda. Is there a way that we can circle back and say that it was previously reviewed?
If you forward me the email, I'll draft a response.
Okay. Yeah, it was, it happened over the holidays and all that stuff, and I didn't want something to slip through the cracks and. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
So Dan will follow up on with the resident on that one. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
All right, on to old business. We're gonna go a little bit out of order, Neil, because we have a very large group right now in this space. So please bear with us.
It's packed there. Looks very packed.
Yeah, it's we're at capacity. I never thought we were gonna say that for traffic.
It's on roll. We got standing room only.
It's all right. It's standing room only. All right, so I'd like to hear a little bit from the representatives on what the concern is on Union Street, and we can have a little bit of a discussion around it. I'll limit us to about 5 minutes for this initial round, if that's okay with everyone.
Yes.
Is that good?
You
Just
saw
for the
that,
record,
right?
I just wanted to say we did file a petition, and I believe everybody,
You saw that,
some
right?
people have a copy.
Yes.
Along with it.
Has everyone seen this petition?
Just.
Yes.
I have not.
So I'll read just briefly. So vehicles travel at excessive rates of speed on Union Avenue. Union Avenue is the only through street from Tompkins Ave to Halsted without a stop sign except at the intersection of Union Avenue. It's the only through street there. Since the Tompkins Ave Bridge went out of use in September of 21, the volume of traffic, including truck traffic, has increased. Vehicles coming south on Tompkins Ave and making a right on Union Ave do so at unsafe rates of speed that causes them to go into oncoming traffic on Union Ave. Union Ave is a narrow street with parking on one side that has become a safety hazard due to the speed and volume of traffic. The French American School of New York is within 1 block radius of Union Ave, and many school children walk on Union Ave to school in unsafe conditions on Union Ave. This is signed by a number of 36 residents. Okay. So can you guys elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Craig Langus. I'm a new member of Union Avenue. We recently purchased our property. Union Ave is a street that seems to be turning over, has a lot of young children, including myself. I have 3 young children that all attend the lower elementary schools. Currently, as it stands, don't feel safe allowing my son to walk to school because he would have to cross over Union to Tompkins and then walk up to Boston Post Road and over to Bellows. Several occasions, my son and myself have walked across the street to walk the dog over on Tompkins and almost been hit. As you come down Tompkins from Boston Post Road, there's a wide turn that the cars make that's sort of lined out on Tompkins with no stop sign there for them. So they make this turn at a really high rate of speed. There's high bushes on the house that's at the corner there. And there's really no line of sight there for any cars to see what they're turning into. So they turn and then what's happened is because of as you mentioned, the Tompkins Ave Bridge being out, it becomes a throughway for all traffic that's trying to make its way between Halsted and Mamaroneck Avenue. It basically is now a really, it's become quite a busy street. And as you said, there's parking that lines, I think, the southern side of the street for most people that are probably going to the train station. And that parking makes the street quite narrow already. So now you're almost down to pretty much a one lane road for most of it, at least as it feels. As you can see, there's quite a bit of construction that was done under the road. I think a lot of it has to do with some work that was done to the pipes all along the road. So that further, there's so many divots and breaks in the road that not only are people driving at higher rates, but they're trying to avoid potholes, breaks in the road. So they're in the center of the road on the other side of the street as they swerve, for lack of better words, down that street. And it's just become, what would really help, honestly, is for stop signs and or speed bumps to be placed. There are two intersections, and if you guys remember the names, I'm not sure.
Ward and Ward.
And Ward, both would be excellent places, and at the corner of Tompkins there would be great places to have people stop, make that right-hand turn or left-hand turn onto Halsted, onto Union, and then to incrementally have to come to a stop along the way so that they can attain these high levels of speed as they're, sort of plowing down that street. And I just feel not only, as I said, not only stop signs, but the speed bumps, it would really just bring a nice smooth stop. And I also don't know what the plans are to fix the Tompkins Bridge. I'm sure that may help a little bit too.
Right.
Yeah, Dan,
But
can
I-
you?
Yeah, so just real quick before I stop, and then I'll stop, is I don't believe that it will eliminate the problem. So if it's like, it's not really one versus the other, hopefully it's over time, it can be both.
I would agree. It's not, I mean, even if there are less cars going because of that, there's still people flying.
We're the only street, as I said in the petition, right, that doesn't have any stop sign between the two ends. And if you go to Melbourne or Beach, those streets are so incredibly quieter than our street. I mean, we are truly the cut through. I mean, everybody's always been there, and people are racing to the train, and as Greg, right?
Yes.
I mean, they just come around that corner like it's the Indianapolis. And literally, if you're coming the other way, you gotta put on your brakes because they're gonna hit you. So it really is markedly different than the other two streets.
And this was taken, but it's never got no cars on it.
June of 2022.
And I was taking a lot, amongst the residents, we've all sort of discussed the idea, well, what can we offer to do? And just one thing I'd like to say that I don't think would help would be some kind of radar with a digital readout, because it kind of makes the street even more look like, yeah, I think we all are in agreement that we'd love for our street to feel like Melbourne Beach and be a part of the community in that way without being such a commercial feeling.
I can agree with them. I live around the corner. I walk through the neighborhood and, I see it all the time. And I don't know if they're going to the train or where they're going, but they're going fast and they're not, giving much room to pedestrians or cars going,
The other issue we have now is, because they closed that bridge down, is we have a lot more truck traffic.
And as Craig said, the road is pretty narrow. So when a truck comes down there, not only do we have to watch the height with the wires, because there's a lot of wires that are hung, and after time, they sag a little bit. So those trucks are coming pretty close to that, but they take up the whole volume of the roadway. And so now what's happening is people are either diverting into people's property, or on the other side of the street between the parked cars. So there's really nothing to do there unless we could just make it, no truck traffic. As most of the streets are in that area, they have signs, no truck traffic. So I don't know if that would help, but that would bring a little bit of ease with the trucks and stuff. When the garbage truck comes down there, he just stops traffic, as in.
Or a UPS truck or an.
Yes.
Well, our sanitation team needs to get down there.
Yeah.
As does our fire department. Yeah, it's that narrow.
Truck.
Yeah.
So that's, the width of the truck, the length of the truck has a
Sure.
lot to do with it. So, because of the width of the street, it's unpassable. That's the only thing I'm saying.
I get
So
you.
now imagine a tractor trailer coming down, or a fire truck coming down when something's wrong, or a police car coming down. Like, when they come down, and even though they have their lights on, you could ask this officer right behind me. A lot of them have problems on that.
There's nowhere to go. So Dan, can you fill us in a little bit about the update on the bridge and
Sure.
maybe, how stop signs might work in this area versus
Okay,
other?
so I mean, as far as Tompkins Avenue Bridge. The village brought on an engineer, I think fall of last year to do design. We've been going back and forth with FEMA because the bridge was damaged during Ida. So, our goal was to get this thing repaired and, through FEMA. We're also looking to not replace it in kind with the Army Corps project. Yeah, so we want, we want to make this thing, rebuild it in a fashion that complements and enhances that project. Right now, our engineer, their surveyor out there, I've been going back and forth with them for about the last month, assembling deeds and everything for a lot of the properties in and around the bridge. I'm hoping we'll be in a position to have construction out there in 2024.
What do you think to replace the head walls? Just replace the head walls and put a span bridge on? I'm very familiar with all that.
We're gonna have to, my guess is, the bridge is eligible to be on the National Register of Historic Places.
I seen that, it's 18 something.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to likely enter into an agreement with the State Office of Historic Preservation. It's similar to what we had to do with Hillside Avenue Bridge. We had to reuse all the stone and
Yeah.
rebuild in a certain fashion.
Well,
We
the
haven't
next-
gotten to that point yet, though,
Yeah.
but I'm just guessing that's probably what's gonna happen. Now, the other thing that's gonna come down the pipe as well is Ward Avenue Bridge, because that's the first element of the Army Corps project. So they're gonna be replacing that bridge. So I'm hoping, and this can only happen in government.
Yeah, we're looking at 3 years.
Well, but between, I'm hoping we're not in a situation where we're gonna be under active construction at Ward Avenue, Tompkins Avenue, and Post Road at the same time. But it's something we can really.
We trust that you can coordinate that. Dan. It's all, no pressure.
Three different government agencies
So,
doing 3 different projects.
So there's obviously what appears to be quite a lot of consensus around calming traffic, slowing traffic. Based on your expertise, what on a narrow road like this, you would think that people aren't flying down the street because people, we know that drivers, when they're made to feel uncomfortable, they slow down. And a pretty narrow street makes drivers tend to feel uncomfortable. So how can we make people feel uncomfortable so they slow down?
Well, I mean, I can, we have things like, this right here, the, pavement markings, people will, drive around that, they'll drive slower. Actually, you're talking about the condition of the roadway. that's actually something that probably does slow down drivers.
Yeah, we need
Well,
to talk.
It actually, if,
So
do me a favor,
Siri,
can you
how
back up and go
traffic
around?
was there.
Yeah, can you go around the corner at top, because there is one of these. just
Yeah,
around
yeah,
the
we did
corner.
that, 2 years ago.
So this one, actually, they just drive straight through it.
Yeah.
And often are in this lane as they make the turn.
Right.
And I mean, I understand what you're saying, that certainly it makes sense that some of this stuff would slow people down, but it's
You
really
go
not.
up just a little bit on the right, see the hedge there?
Yes.
They can't see what's around that corner, and they're going, and they can't see going around that corner on the left coming off the spruce.
So, I can show you something, just actually kind of around the corner where we, worked with a homeowner too.
Well, they took out everything there.
Well, no, this isn't it, this is just so.
Um,
So we've been, we're dabbling with speed humps in some areas. What is the efficaciousness of that, Dan?
Well, I mean, we've done it on, Grand Street. I'm not out there every day to view the traffic. But, I've heard relatively good things about it.
It is helping.
There are certain guidelines for where and how you install them. But you're just kind of, this is the corner of Tompkins and Beach, and this is what it looked like.
Well, that's the group home that's there.
But in terms of, you mentioned the edges. Yeah, look, this is what it looked like in 2013. So we worked with these guys to remove these hedges, and it opens it up a lot.
Yep.
But I think, we can certainly, if there's a visual obstruction, that's a code enforcement issue, and I can ask our building department to take a look at that.
Is there,
With respect to their issue, the French American School has the drop off on Spruce Street, and they pick up there also. So you have cars and you have buses, small buses going there, picking up and dropping off. And they're making a right turn on Tompkins, although some, half of them want to go left. So they're motivated to go faster because they're not going the way they want. And they're making a right turn. The first corner house has a high hedge. If at the corner of Spruce and Tompkins. Then they make a left turn onto Union Avenue. The first house on the corner on the left there has a high hedge. And then the other house over here that you just pointed out, that's on Union and Tompkins going up the hill, has a high hedge. So you have people who want to go faster and they can't see what's around the corner. And if they survive that, they're motivated to go even faster down the street.
Yeah, they do. And what happens there, I know what you guys did is you put the traffic paint down to widen that
Channel,
area, to
channel the
channel the traffic. Yeah, but you could have put sisters, all right. There are those plastic things that go and you could run them over. but- Well, they're plastic delineators, they're called sisters, and you could have did that and followed your traffic paint. And that would have kept them out, like what you have right there. That could have kept them out. But because the problem is they're still going against the curb line, and just like Craig said, and still filtering in. So even if they trim those the bushes, they're still, they're already committed before they even know what's coming.
Is there a way to put those in? We put some of those in on the corner of Prospect and Fenimore.
Yes, on the bump outs.
Yeah, those bump, and there, I think those are,
They're visible.
they get people's attention.
Yeah.
People slow.
yeah, but so the problem, so now we're talking about the traffic just coming off of Tompkins onto Union.
Well, I think your problem is
It's
multifaceted.
Yeah,
I mean,
There's not
it's
it's not a stop sign.
Right.
And
It's
you have
a
a
few
cut, you have a cut
things.
through, you have a tight curb where obviously there was an issue identified previously. That's why they painted out those lines, right? I mean, this is not like a new thing. And now you're having people race through there.
And then the whole distance with no.
Yeah,
stop sign.
yeah. So there's a couple,
By
there's a
the
couple
time they're
things
at
going
either
on.
end.
Yeah,
And there's
pretty
like a
close.
car every 20
I
seconds.
mean,
Right.
honestly, even, to me, it feels like those midway street stop signs and maybe even a stop sign there at the corner where you painted out that area. Those two things, even as a start, because it really does feel to me like if you look at the street, and maybe that's a
It's
bad
so
example, if you go, it's in terrible condition.
Well, it doesn't show the
You know.
grade of the street either. The problem is when you come from Holsted to Tompkins, there's a grade difference. So you have a height of, from here that goes down and you do have a blind spot. And sometimes you could hear the traffic moving over or trying to stop from hitting. And that's one of the things that we need to look at, because you can see the
All
grade
these are
difference.
Much deeper.
But
than
yeah, it
the-
comes down. So a stop sign at Ward would help there if we could, if that could be done. So I don't know, what are the guidelines for a stop sign?
So for an always stop, there's the, we call the manual of uniform traffic control devices. And it establishes warrants for when you can install always stops. And it's, if the intersection has 5 or more accidents in a 12-month period, or there's some sort of geometric issue with the intersection. As far as, stop signs and speeding, and, I've said this 1,000 times, and it doesn't make me friends. The evidence shows that stop signs do not slow down traffic.
Sure.
What they do is, you're back up to full speed about 150 feet from the stop sign. And oftentimes, drivers, when they feel like they've lost time because of stopping or slowing down, they may actually increase their speed. So it's not the best solution. I can talk to our traffic engineer, see if there's some other solutions. Like I said, he was the one who recommended the line, the pavement markings that we did at the corner of Tompkins and Union, which it really needs to touch up. My opinion, when I've seen people on, Tompkins, as I do, I haven't taken that way recently because I couldn't take Tompkins after the bridge. But when that was first done, I noticed people were, staying within the lines. So.
Have you guys done a walkability assessment? Is that something that we could request or?
Well, I can talk to our traffic engineer about that. In terms of, let's see, there are sidewalks on
Both
here,
sides.
both sides.
There's no safe place to cross, though, I think is what you're getting at, right? Like, we have young kids too, and I'm never gonna let them walk to school.
Sorry,
But your stat about people not slowing down, I think one of the problems is we have so much traffic that would otherwise go to Melbourne Beach everywhere if we had stop signs. Everyone's
Why
sort
did
of
they
filtering
have
into us.
crosswalks?
I cannot answer that question. It's been that way, I guess, for decades. And
Is there a spot where people who traditionally cross, is there a crossing?
There's no crosswalks.
There's no crosswalk. Well, I mean.
well, there's a crosswalk at the.
At Tompkins, right, but
Is
that's
there-
the
is
blind
there-
spot, so that's a very unsafe.
But if there's something that a crosswalk that could be constructed, where you redirect pedestrians to, and you could do some of the things that you did over on Federal.
Yeah, the crosswalk's tucked in there. That's another issue. So people are already committed in their turn when people are crossing the street. The actual crosswalk is not on the corner, so the people that are coming down see people in the crosswalk. It's tucked in off the corner, so they're already committed, and that's why there's a lot of incidents. There are people walking their dogs because the dogs are walking a little slower than the people, and that's what's happening.
And that's why I was mentioning the putting those, what'd you call this?
Delineators.
The delineators. Because that is you said a very interesting term. You said people are committed to that turn.
Yeah.
And that's right. People commit to that turn. And then there's all of a sudden a crosswalk there and they're not expecting a care or a combination thereof. So yeah, it's set in.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
That is.
But they don't see it coming around.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually,
Yeah.
where you probably see most of the time is that the crosswalks should be closer to the intersection. But in this case, it's set back a bit because it's a shorter distance to cross, so. I think that's.
Is a stop sign an option there? Is a stop sign an option here? Because like I've almost been hit on this crosswalk several times. A lot of people we have in this room,
Street.
all of us have almost been hit on that crosswalk. So we're like, that's why we're here asking for a stop sign.
Just for this one direction.
I want to recognize
This
Rob
especially,
Stark. real
Yeah,
quick.
especially that
Go-
section.
Rob, go ahead.
Excuse me.
That would help a lot.
I've driven down the street many times, particularly at night, and my experience is driving south on Tompkins. As you're approaching Union, lighting is terrible. You could I have to drive slow just to find the street. And when you find the street, even when you get on Union, the lighting is so bad. I feel having driven that at night myself, it's hazardous. You could the lighting is terrible. I don't know if you all have the same
Really, my
problem.
son has
Lighting
almost
is
been
terrible.
So we have
with
a
me
tra- we have a
on two
light-
occasions.
a light
I had to
here,
pull
but
him
it's
off the
really-
road to avoid
If that can be reoriented maybe.
I don't
Yeah, they
think
should
lighting's
start
gonna
at the
help.
corner.
I mean, like honestly, if we could put the stop sign in, that would help this turn, and then we could start talking about.
Can we
the-
put a,
the
can we
straightaway
put a
on the
stop
end.
sign right here, Dan?
Yeah.
Since there's already a stop sign, can we modify anything over here? And turn that, can you do it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's.
Because you said geographically, what?
Or geometric.
Geometrically.
So
sorry,
like.
Geometrically odd.
So,
Well, I
yeah,
think it's a little odd.
yeah, I
judging
mean,
by
it's like,
corner.
a lot of times you'll see, like an intersection where, one side is, like not really lined up with the other.
Right.
It's dangerous to begin with, just
So-
because of that.
Is there justification to do because it's geometrically challenged right here? Is there a way to?
Yeah, let me,
I mean, Lou, does it
I'll look into it, you know,
does that look lined up?
No, it's not lined up by long
Yeah.
shot.
Brian,
None of the corners
can I
here are
ask-
lined up.
you know, well, I mean,
You go ahead. Yeah.
I'm the Safe Routes to School
Yeah.
liaison, so not really Rhinebeck, but I know there's two schools there. Why is there not, so now we have the French American school there, that's much more heavily used than it ever was. And a lot of the kids that are coming there, I see are walking from the train.
All from St. Vito.
So I feel like there should be a crosswalk across Tompkins there with a stop sign. There is a crosswalk at the nursery school, but then there's nothing.
I mean, you guys are further down the block.
So it's,
Go
and
into
it's
it.
not a straight road, so it's hard to see and tricky to cross.
and kind of to ask your question about how these intersections get misaligned. I mean, this is a neighborhood that was first developed in the 1870s. It was, these are, well, they were horse trails.
Horse trails.
I mean,
The horse
this is,
Yes.
unfortunately, that's the issue with a lot of roads in the village of this, vintage.
We are in a school zone. I mean, basically, I think if you look at the distance from the school to where we are, that's still considered a school zone.
Preschool.
So, well, the schools, well,
That's not true.
I don't know what the school, there's a school zone limit is prescribed in the village code.
I think it's 2 blocks.
Yeah, well, I mean, that, my guess is it was set up when, it was, 300 feet or 350 feet from the building.
Dan, just real quick, I just want to hear from Richard.
Several communities, New Rochelle, the Large Mountain Woods area, New Rochelle has in areas like this. Not around it, but they have a green space in the middle of the intersection, so that you cannot drive straight through. You have to slow down and go slightly around, and you go counterclockwise.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
then the
that-
plows might not be able to clear.
Well, no, I mean, it would be built the way a fire truck or a plow could get through, but would that slow down the traffic? Would that be beneficial? If you blended it, so that you're not gonna just get 10 stop signs on Union Avenue.
I can ask about that, but again, I think that's part of when the driver perceives less comfort when they're driving, they will drive slow.
I wish that was the case.
Well, no, it's,
And speed humps.
Yeah,
well, I mean, I can look into that. Again, there are certain rules and regulations, like you can't have it like immediately next to a driveway. I think it has to be more than a certain amount of feet from an intersection. So I don't know if there would be a particular area that may qualify. My guess there is one, but I don't know where that would be.
and they are used for the purpose of calming the traffic.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, as opposed to a stop sign, like what you said before, which is not usually for speed.
And I don't
If
think
we can
there's
get
any-
something in the center of that road, I mean, you wouldn't need, what do you think, two, even two in the middle?
Yeah, I mean, if we could do a stop sign here and a stop sign at Inman, that would be a really
Well,
problem to start.
Well,
I agree with the speed humps as well. They are county.
Well,
All right,
so,
so.
let me take a step back. There, I think there are things we could. I know you mentioned that the speed display sign, but what that also does is allows us to be active, just to understand, to quantify what the issues are. So
It's not permanent.
and it's not perfect. And so I think I would like to, talk to police, can we at least, put that up, see what, it would quantify what because it'll tell us what the volume is and what the speeds are. So
So-
it'll answer kind of those two questions. I do have some volume data from Tompkins Avenue Bridge that we did in 2019, which is probably still accurate. Actually, probably more than what it is now because people being on Zoom 24/7.
Yeah.
And what's the data collection period when you, when we're able to put in like the speed monitor?
I'd have to talk with the chief about that. I mean, I know that it's, we schedule it well in advance because there are a lot of areas that these are asked for, especially, with around the schools, walking to and from. We tend to have it closer to the schools, this time of year, but again, I'd have to have that discussion with the chief.
And is it too premature, Dan, to consider a four-way stop at this particular intersection?
Well, I mean,
It would
the,
make a huge difference, and we understand that everything is not gonna happen all at once, and it's not our goal to sit here and tell you overhaul the street all at once, but
Incrementalism.
I live diagonally across from this. I'm 3 houses in on the south side of the street. And I cross every night with my kid who, only wants to walk the dog with me. And I'm afraid to take him, and he would take this across the street and he would walk up Tompkins out to Boston Post Road to walk to his school. But I have 3 children that are all getting close to age to be able to do that with each other.
what's your name?
I'm 216. So I'm the small yellow house next to the pink house.
No,
With the cat on the front porch,
So again,
with the cat on the front porch.
no cat on the front.
Oh, there's
That
a
was the
wooden-
pink.
no,
there's a
Oh,
wooden
Yeah.
cat.
That's the pink house.
Oh, it's the
My
dollhouse.
dog every.
It's in the dollhouse.
You ready to stop or no?
I think-
You have to wait.
If you were gonna relook at that intersection, if you spin around, the fact that that stop sign is pulled back so far and that hedge is there, you have no idea who's coming. You're like, I just have to say a prayer. Like,
Well,
or
It's actually nice of the.
Well, this is
how
one
that
great
walking.
assessment too, because you could see that what happens here is the cars start to slow because they're still cars that are allowed to come from down for the cars that are in that neighborhood. So they all kind of come to this intersection and they look at each other like, what do we do? And
yeah, like right.
these
there.
that are on this side automatically take the priority because there is no stop sign and there is no roadblock. So these guys just go up, I'm first, and the other, 2 directions, this and this.
Yeah.
And-
All right.
As far as this, the hedges, I'm gonna reach out to the building department. That's a code enforcement issue. They can, give the property owner an order to remedy if it's a violation. So that should clear that up to a certain extent. As far as, I'll talk to the chief about what if we can do for the speed monitor or what the timing would be. I can also speak to our traffic engineer, see if there's any, generic thoughts. I said, you can already look at the intersection, at this part of the intersection. So I can ask him to look at maybe at it more globally. He may have already, so let me dig out, some of the communications I had with him from 2019.
I want to have something on the right. The owner of that house may tell you that you're allowed to have a hedge so many feet. The ground behind the hedge is higher. So they may tell you that I'm within my rights. So I think a softer touch on something like that may work
Yeah.
better.
What about bringing the stop sign forward so that you are, because eventually when you inch forward, you can see.
What's the hesitation to the 4-way stop? Like, sense a lot of
It-
hesitation.
It needs to be engineered, I think.
Yeah,
It needs-
okay.
You have to have like a traffic
Well,
professional
I mean, you have
look
to,
at it to see if it's what's
as
possible.
far as where the stop sign is, right, it has to be behind the crosswalk.
Right,
Can you
right.
move the
I think-
crosswalk
yeah,
and make it larger?
Well, that was-
Diagonal, not straight.
That was the thing is,
The crosswalk should be
if you,
diagonal, not
if,
straight.
again, usually the crosswalk would be closer to here, but it also makes it a longer crosswalk. So I think it was specifically positioned here to make it as short as possible.
Understood.
And I think, again, I think we may have looked, again, I think that was one of the things I mentioned back when we looked at this in 2019. I mean, really, it should be closer here, but
Could a new curve be where that painted line is and then everything could move forward?
Yeah, or
Yeah,
something
it's
similar
made
to
the sidewalk
Blossom,
bigger.
something
Yeah.
similar
Yeah,
to
we
Top
definitely did.
Petmore would be really
Above that,
appropriate.
right.
Right, that has not slowed anybody down.
Even with
Well,
the shorter hedge, people are still gonna see around the corner.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Those
You
lines
might
have to
just
be-
like-
I think at this point,
Right.
we spent about,
Yeah.
we spent about 35 minutes.
Well, let me, what I want to do is I want to, yeah, I know we looked at this intersection back in 2019. There were several suggestions that I think our traffic engineer gave us at the time. I think we just moved forward with this one at the time, but there may be some other ideas he had back then.
Okay, so we'll look at that intersection and see what the engineer says, because there has to be some solution. It's a what is it? Geometrically problematic conundrum, geometric conundrum. So if we can look at that, and then I really think that getting that speed monitor in there, like ASAP, and somehow prioritizing that with PD. And then if we can, we're experimenting with speed humps. I think this is an excellent case study for us to experiment with speed humps. If not here, then where? I mean, it's a cut through. Let's see what it does to really impact traffic speed in the community. Let's just give it a go.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's just, I think it's just important that we just look for solutions that aren't really Band-Aids and, as I think you suggested.
So I remember, and we're supposed to schematics figure once he's been. intersection.
The parking issue too, like, we had to get the resident stickers. And it says till 7 PM, like, what, 2 hour parking if you don't have the resident sticker. And there's guys that they have a construction company and they got like 5 trucks that they just park in the street at like 4:30. And so 2 hours later is 6:30, it says until 7 o'clock, but then the meter maids go home at 5 o'clock. So nobody enforces that. I mean, we have to get the resident sticker and then they just come with 5 or 6 trucks and just park it there when they're done for the day. And
So
That's it.
there's an enforcement piece as well.
Yeah.
All right, so there's a lot of stuff going on Union Ave.
So their residential parking is not being enforced.
But then I remember this.
Huh?
4:30.
So yes, sir.
Well-
The Tompkins Avenue side is still very important, but the other end of there, that staggered junction with the Needle Lane and Hinman, is also a cut through from Melbourne going out to Halsted and the other way around, where you can't actually see coming out of Hinman what's coming along Union. And we're at 402, so we're right across from Hinman. So we have multiple times a day where people are either honked at because they're driving down Union too fast and someone's poking out at them. So that junction as well needs to be looked at, and the speed that they're coming from Halsted right the way down to Union.
Well, it's definitely a microcosm of all of our issues throughout the village. I think it's been impressed upon us that there is significant issues that we need to look at. So thank you all for representing your block.
How do we find out if there's any progress?
Well, I think you can check back in with the next meeting. Dan Sarnoff will do some research for us on everything from the speed monitor to looking at this study at the intersection and seeing what else can be done and kind of flesh that out. Dan's really good at kind of creating a plan and allowing us to execute in conjunction with approval from the Board of Trustees.
So that would be
So
old
this-
business if we came.
You'd be old business now.
Ryan,
Okay.
Ryan,
Just to,
can we also include enforcement? Because if their residential parking isn't being enforced and they have commercial vehicles parked on their street during the course of the day, taking up
ma'am.
their parking, that's a whole side component that is a disservice. to them.
Agree. I can mention enforcement. Okay.
Great.
Thank you so much.
just to kind of, like I said, I remember we had looked at this a couple of years ago. This was one of the proposals that was put forth by our traffic engineer. So that would be the crosswalk forward and unfortunately, we just kind of did this part.
I like the green thing.
As I said, you know.
And
I'll
it's
review
like
the
Belgian
other
Blackstone.
traffic signals. We'll look at this fast.
I know, a few traffic signals.
No, it doesn't have to be an accident.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's like the Larchmont Woods area, you know, it's just, there's something.
All right.
Should we do Mr. Zagaroli?
Yeah,
And you can involve the park, the tree.
can we do Mr. Zekaroli real quick, that you're with which,
Grant and Walling Street. The parking, illegal parking.
oh, yes,
Yeah, he
this
sent
came
me-
up today.
Here's his email. I didn't print them all out.
So this is an enforcement piece, right?
Yeah, I'll give you a little history of, those no parking areas.
Different days and the same trucks park there. So does that go to, Dan, how does that work? If somebody's just parking, is that purely enforcement?
Well, are they,
Well, it's different cars, different nights.
so, but. So it's a different car each night, or are
Well,
they
yeah.
parked legally when they're parked, or,
It says no parking here to corner,
okay,
and then there's a section in front of 138 Grant Street that is no parking at all. And that was brought about 40 years ago by then the fire council, when Chief Doria was the chief. And I was a member of the traffic commission back then as well. And what was happening was the fire trucks could not turn on Grant Street to go up to Walling Street. So they eliminated one space on each side of Walling Street and 2 spaces on Grant Street. So now, the last couple of years, there's a lot of overcrowded houses there and cars are coming out of the woodwork and they just park wherever they want.
okay, so, but if they're parked illegally, it's an enforcement issue.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So what, in that case, what does a resident do if
I'm
they're?
getting tired of calling the police department every day. You know, they know who I am.
I mean, that's why I suggested, you call the police department,
Yeah.
you
I-
know,
I would suggest that on those 2 corners and in front of 138 Grand, in front of 138 Grand, there was a big no parking painted on the ground. And then when the road was repaved, it never was painted again. And the striping like you had there on
Tompkins.
Union Avenue, I think that might help because it's a dark area over there. And people just casually park there and they can't read the sign.
So Dan, is there a way to get anything painted out there or?
Well, I mean, is the sign, is there an issue with the sign? Like, is it faded? Is it?
No, people just park there.
So it sounds like a real enforcement issue.
Yeah.
Okay,
You
I
could
don't
park
wanna-
that with a little fresh paint.
I don't want to put my friend on the spot.
Well, that's another issue.
We had faded. Dan,
He should have gotten a license plate.
we had faded spot parking lines on Washington Street and Chief DeRusa had put a work order in and she had them rectified.
Okay.
The rest of the area, probably through all the corridor, straight through Howard, even considering with all the flooding that has occurred, it's probably something that needs to be revisited as a
Yeah.
whole and rolled out as a project because they're faded. we've gone over this with crosswalks in Washingtonville. We have that issue completely, but I think we keep circling back to the same issue of the enforcement. We have, you know, no parking, no standing, and cars are no parking and no standing. And there's valuable parking that's being lost for the residents, tenants, and business owners for cars that are over parking
Well,
and overtaking
if there
valuable
are,
space.
with the number of no parking restrictions we have in those,
Right.
we just can't paint everything. I mean, if there's some high profile locations, which you can identify, you know, send them to me and I'll talk to Public Works about it, but maybe that's a way to start.
Okay.
No, it seems, I mean, people are parking there because they need to find parking in that neighborhood, which is super crowded. Like,
Yeah.
is no parking like 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. sign zone an option?
Well, the issue is if there's no park, well, we have the residential parking. system.
Yes.
Right.
If we had if we said no parking, it's gotta be enforced equally, regardless of residency. So it would impact the homeowners and the residents out there just as much as everyone else. So I don't know if that's necessarily the best approach. I think we want to try and do what we can to enforce it to make sure we have the maximum spaces available. But obviously, again, it's
Well, you
four
have-
family homes in area.
It's an enforcement issue.
Yeah.
There's commercial vehicles, there's no parking, and it's throughout the village. I mean, I see that in Rhinebeck.
Yeah.
They're everywhere, and we're lacking on that component to remove the vehicles like that don't belong to ensure that there's room for the rest. But that's, that's what
Yeah.
that's what's in need.
I wanna make sure that we have time for Neil here.
Yeah.
He's been waiting patiently.
Can I just have
Yes, sir.
another minute on that?
Yes.
The other reason why I suggested put in the stripe in on Alling Street is only about 20% sidewalk at the top. So there's no sidewalks on either side of the street. And in the morning, children and adults have to walk in the street. And while those cars are blocking the view of the pedestrians walking down Alling Street.
Well,
Can you bring it up?
yeah, I think that,
Here's-
Just a.
Tell them turn them all and go the other way around.
Yeah.
It's a one-way in off of Grand, it goes into.
Yes.
Goes right back to.
Where the door would.
Right there. That one of
My name is George Keller. This is my neighbor and friend Alex.
Mr. Keller.
Yeah.
From last. All right, so. Sorry, what?
I'm trying to bring it up on this,
So I think that again, it comes out, it sounds like this is largely in enforcement.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay,
Now you're looking right. Yeah.
okay. Right, there's a sign there, right there. Okay, and on both sides of the street, cars will park from there to the corner,
On both sides.
on both sides. Okay, and there's the other sign.
I mean,
There's another sign there.
they're plainly visible.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's not a. That's not.
and on Tuesdays and Fridays, when the sanitation come, forget it, they can't even, yeah,
Yeah, again, I mean, it's,
yeah,
this is the first suburbs, one of the first suburbs built in the United States, and
yeah.
again, these roads were laid out when places were
And also, if you just go back on Grand Street where you had it, you'll see the other way. Okay, yeah,
Around.
okay. There's a sign over there. There's no parking from where that box is. Oh, go back. From that box down to the next driveway,
this way or.
Right down
to the left. There's a sign
Right
there.
there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's right,
Yeah.
right by the fence.
And there used to be a big no parking painted on the street there. But that faded out when, and the road was repaved as well.
Let's see, 2007.
All right. So in consideration of time, we have 30 minutes left in the meeting. I think that we have a couple more things to deal with. So I think this one seems to be an enforcement and a possible painting issue. And so we're looking at, with Public Works and seeing what orders can be put in.
We're not gonna be doing any painting for the next couple of months.
Oh, I figured that,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, yeah, that's no
But
problem.
no, I think continuing to monitor it and track, I mean, I think what you're doing by sending in this information is just evidencing that you have a problem of
Yeah.
enforcement on your block, and that's not pointing fingers. That's just,
No, it's
we all,
just general.
we all can just do better, right? And something's going on, and people shouldn't be parking where they shouldn't be parking. So thanks for bringing it up to
Okay.
our attention.
No, I monitor it because I'm retired, I have nothing to do, so. I just,
No, I think it's good. I think it's an important thing. Thank you so much. And think about getting back on the traffic commission at some point. There's always days, it seems. Yeah, we have an opening. Fun. Okay, so I'm gonna you all will learn a lot from this next bit. I hope this is a really good piece. So we're going to turn over to Neil Desai. Neil is our transportation systems person. He's part of our old business, and he's doing our comp plan for the village of Mamaroneck. And he's joining us again for the second time today. So thank you, Neil. Thank you for being so patient with us. And I know that we had questions. Rob had put some questions together. And I know we all read through chapter 8. So I just want to open up the floor. So thanks for being with us, Neil.
Sure, thanks. And the beauty of Zoom is that it seems like I'm paying rapt attention, but I was doing other Mamaroneck work. So, but I was also listening because I think some of the questions I met Mr. Stark yesterday when I presented at the Board of Trustees, and he was asking questions about how does this start to happen especially with the question of bikes and bike lanes and I think I think one of the recommendations in the current November 2020 draft is to do essentially what I had responded in. I think it was in an email. Or maybe I had mentioned this to Mr. Stark, but do what the town of Mamaroneck had done. They had a consultant that put together a presentation. They had done, looked at all the networks along the street, along the streets in the town, and they came up with some conceptual recommendations. Now I don't know whether that has been implemented or not, but that type of thing is what the village would do to design a system. And the same thing for pedestrian safety. I think it's great to be responsive to issues that emerge, but to be able to plan ahead and look holistically at identifying intersections, prioritizing ones, and having a more broader plan for that can help can help a lot. But yes, go ahead.
So, in the town of Mamaroneck, if people are familiar with Fenimore Road, it goes in the village of Mamaroneck and the town of Mamaroneck, it's Fenimore, then becomes Grand Park in Scarsdale. Back in 2020 or 2021, Con Ed did a major project installing new gas mains along, basically from I think White Plains into Scarsdale, into the town of Mamaroneck, village of Mamaroneck, and then Rye. And they provided money to all the municipalities to repave Fenimore. And if you drive on Fenimore Road in the town, you'll see that they have the sharrows along the street. So they did that.
Great. So that's and because I assume it's because they had that thinking in place that they're able to implement that. But
it was only like 2 years ago, or less than maybe 2 years ago.
But I guess there's a couple things I want to do. I want to respond to the questions that you all had. I wanted to show yesterday what I presented to the Board of Trustees was this presentation. This is the what I sent you previously through Dan was just the rough download of what the shortcut of what we had, because we had just finished close the survey and analyze it, but we've been putting together a presentation to communicate the results to the public. We had 851 responses, I think you might have known, but I thought this was interesting in terms of what people like most about living in the village. And walkability is an interesting thing, because I think the village, even my personal experience, the village is walkable, but I would say, I would contend it's not pedestrian friendly. It's getting to that. It is starting to get that way, and it needs to get that way. But I just found that interesting that, you know, that this turned out to be one of the top, you know, things that people really appreciated. So, you know, that was just an interesting point. But I intend to, this will be shared publicly, and I think Mr. Stark had asked me to, there was 900 comments that people had submitted. Let's see what we got here. There's 900 comments, and you know, this presentation does some bit of summary of presenting some of those comments, but I can provide that. I think Mr. Stark was curious to see the written comments, because there's a range of comments that people, you know, about specific to traffic commission things, about bike safety. I would say bikeability was obviously if you had talked about the or looked at the results of the survey, you know, bike, especially especially the open-ended comment, to see bike safety is something that the public is certainly clamoring for. You know, bike lanes and just to be able to bike around in the village. And so I'll be able to share this presentation when it's completed, and the full-on comments. Unfortunately, they're not sorted. They're just the comments that people had. If I had an intern, I would definitely take time to sort them by topic, but you'll have all the full comments, and you can look through them, and see what other things people had to say. Some were just short, but some were also very, very detailed. Some had interesting feedback, and, you know, thoughtful feedback that they had. So I can't wait to share that with you, which will probably be on Thursday or so. The e-newsletter, I intend to have the presentation ready, and a link in the next issue of the Village Weekly e-newsletter. So that's that. And yeah, and I guess I wanted to get straight to the comments. I guess, did anybody have any reaction to what I just talked about in the survey results? But you know, I think I want to head straight to the comments and questions and address them. So I think, well, thanks for taking the time to dig into the chapter 8. And so I wanted to go through some of these, go through some of your questions and comments. And I think let me see, there's a couple here. So let me start with, just real quickly, I think the question is about, it refers back to the 2012 plans recommendations, and how many of them are valid. But there's also, in the last 10 years, obviously, transportation trends transportation has one of the most kind of quickest evolving fields out there. And there is a section in the actual comprehensive plan, in the draft here, that does go into some of those trends. And I think some of them you're very familiar with, ride hailing being one of them, Uber and Lyft. And another issue, I think something that I talked about with Mr. Stark yesterday, he had questions about sharing systems, which means bicycle sharing, scooter sharing, car sharing. You know, Mamaroneck actually does have a Zipcar pod in the train station, which I've used before when I've, you know, come to the village and needed to drive around to take pictures and such. But so and then there's the parking systems, using Park Mobile as an app. So there's, I think you're already familiar with a lot of these trends. You may have seen them in Mamaroneck, but you certainly have seen them in maybe the larger cities. You might have seen bike shares. You might have seen scooter shares. E-bike sharing now is happening in the larger cities. Electric scooters, And, to whatever extent these are applicable to Mamaroneck, it's something that should be, these are things that should be kept in mind. And I think, the suggestion that the question Mr. Stark had me yesterday was, bike share, if you're to have a bike share system in the village, how would that develop? And I think my response to him was I think first, before, I think people are just in general are not, I mean, yeah, people do bike in Mamaroneck and they bike on sidewalks and such, but there's also, especially in the comments I saw there's people who would like to bike, but just don't feel safe biking. I think if the village were eventually, were to plan out a bike system and start implementing it, and people start to actually bike, I think considering a bike sharing system, I mean, hey, this is a coastal town, people love riding bikes near the beach and such. I think that's something that several, once you've built up the kind of the facilities for biking, I think then that's maybe something in the next several years later could be feasible as a bike sharing system when it becomes more common and more safe, and people are more just more just feel safer biking through the village. Another I think electric vehicle infrastructure is an obvious one, another trend. Now, I think over here I talk about microtransit, and that's essentially using a number of towns of the size of Mamaroneck. This example here and this page is in Norwalk Transit District. I do need to look at where that is, but they have ride sharing, a microtransit, which essentially is it's essentially Uber or Lyft, but for multiple people, and it tends to be geared towards couple of destinations like the train station and so on and so forth, and it's app based, and it's travelers who are, as it says here, people who, travelers with the same or similar trips are picked up and dropped together as groups. And so these are just, so the purpose of this section is just to lay out what are some of the trends in transportation. And they may not seem realistic now, but later down the line, some of them may be more realistic in the shorter term, but later down the line it could be, if I think the main, the principle of how do you reduce traffic congestion is simple, at least stated, is you reduce the number of people driving, and so you give people more options to walk, to bike, to take maybe you can start to I think look at microtransit in the future. So
I have a question, Neil.
Sure.
It's more a body. I heard you mention Norwalk. I have a question about that. Norwalk is a city. How do we correlate to being compared to a city as we're a village?
Well, I think Norwalk, well, sometimes it's semantic. Norwalk, I'd say, has some qualities. I'd say Norwalk is a little bit more urbanized than Mamaroneck, but it has a Metro North station there. It has a downtown. I think it's a little bit more taller and a little more.
Darien, maybe, or
Yeah.
Coscott
Yeah.
before Norwalk.
Yeah, probably, yeah, something smaller in scale. Is a more, it will be more, an equal kind of more apples to apples comparison. But I think Norwalk, in terms of the population, I don't know, I believe it might be double, about 40,000. So it is a little larger, but it is I was trying to give an example of a smaller scale town that has it, so that I'm not just putting, pure city metropolitan examples in the comprehensive plan. I'm sorry, what was the question about Norwalk again? Was just the comparison?
Yeah, my concern would be we're in this plan being compared to a
Yeah.
city. And
Yeah.
I would take that as false data. And
I
that would
think,
concern me
I don't,
instead of comparing
yeah,
something in similarity, because we are a village, we're not a town, and we are
Right.
definitely not a city.
right.
So that concerns me as far as, you know, the foundation of the comprehensive
Well,
plan.
I mean, there are cities that have the same population. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just a matter of semantics. I
Is-
mean, Darien is a larger community.
Demographically, is Norwalk similar to the village?
No,
No.
No,
29,000 to
it's
91.
Connecticut.
No, not demographic.
No.
I don't think
In
there's
terms of
big
those,
comparing Mamaroneck to Norwalk at all. It's
No.
just showing an example of a trend. So Mamaroneck demographics.
Yeah, I have a question, a point.
Sure.
So I'm looking back, the comprehensive plan goes back to 2012, revised in 2020. There's a lot of mention of using bikes, putting bike lanes in.
Yeah.
Considering it, but I'm challenging this commission to actually start doing something about it.
Yeah.
I look in Rye, maybe it's a city, but there's on Forest Avenue, there's share of the road, bike insignias.
I think
On
we're
Largemont
bigger than
Ave-
Monarch, actually.
What?
We're bigger.
Well,
But I'm saying it's done already.
Yeah.
Largemont Avenue, you have bike
It's
lanes.
implemented.
We need to start doing something. I think Palmer, I guess my question to you is, could we, if we do the bike sharing program, will the bikes be allowed to go on the sidewalks? I mean, technically bicycles are not supposed to be. on the sidewalks.
No, not.
No, I mean,
It's challenging enough right now.
Boston
No,
Post
you
Road,
ride
it would
in
need
the
to be a
street.
start. What?
Right, don't be like,
Where
it's a
where
vehicle.
on the street are you gonna ride in Mamaroneck?
So,
There's
I mean,
nowhere that's-
and
It's
there-
not that safe.
So
So
then you can't walk on the sidewalk.
if you look at Boston Post Road, there's very few people walking on the sidewalk.
I'm sorry, I cited my numbers yesterday in a meeting. I have a dog that is uncaring and unyielding. We walk and walking down the post road, I'm challenged every morning by the French kids going to the French American school. A lot of them have electric scooters, electric bikes.
Lieutenant,
On
I
the-
yield
on
to
the sidewalk.
on the street, right?
I'm just trying to get something going with.
Yeah,
But I just don't want to become
Well,
No, it's.
pancake.
I think one of the things you may want to mention though is, but some of these roads are not under our jurisdiction.
I understand that, but I'm looking
Yeah,
at particularly Palmer Road, I think Palmer Avenue we spoke about.
Well,
Shared.
Palmer's a county road.
So what- Yeah,
And I think, Neil and I spoke about the project that we're gonna do on Halsted with the Transportation Alternatives Program.
Right.
Is it worth putting something in the comprehensive plan about, making sure we look to implement,
Like
a
accessible.
bike accessibility or, safe routes, things like that.
And it.
yeah,
Like-
without a doubt. I mean, I think, the traffic engineer I work with, I've worked with him in Portchester several years ago, and his advice was, you have to obviously have an engineer look at something, but if there's a place, whether it's Halsted Avenue or not, where you're reconstructing, and it could be, it may make sense technically, feasible perspective to put in some sort of bike facility, and that what that means is essentially either a bike lane, a shared lane, Sharrow, or whatever it is. I don't think you'd be able to get a separated, protected bike lane, but if it's just pavement marking, go ahead and do it and see how it works, or do a demonstration project in a block and see how it functions. So those are things you can do, kind of barring a more thought out plan. But essentially, the top priority recommendation in this comp plan right now is to prepare a village-wide plan for bicycle facilities and amenities, and so that includes not just the lanes and markings and signs, but also signs and racks and such. And that is essentially what the town of Mamaroneck probably did. I don't know if they advanced it from conceptual to something a little more detailed, but that's going to be able to start to determine the roads, and what kind of treatment they could have. I think with Boston Post Road, right, it's a state road. That's more of a multi-municipal push probably. if there was a desire among the towns, along Boston Post Road to do something different, I think that would be something you could contemplate in this type of plan, but it would probably need multi-municipal backing to get that done.
Not to get,
I mean, that's a huge undertaking, putting a bike lane in Boston Post Road, I realize that, but some of the smaller roads, even the Helmer or, I don't know, some of the cut-through roads, to put something like the pavement markings, I think we should do that as soon as possible. And if you look at other towns, maybe not Manhattan, but they eliminate parking on one side.
Yeah.
And they stretch it out and they put a bike lane. I mean, if you're going to Manhattan, you wouldn't believe the bike lanes that are there. There's no, we need to, I don't know, really look into it.
Dan,
We
maybe
need to think
that's,
about
Now,
it.
one thing you might want to
And it's a
consider,
big job. but-
you got to start somewhere. Perhaps you connect the parks with a system of bike lanes. In other words, I was just imagining a bike share rack at Columbus Park. You take the bike out, ride down to Harbor Island Park, slap it in the rack. Another one at Florence Park, and then another one at these others. And then you have bike, make sure that we have bike lanes and connect.
But
all
how do you
the
get
parks.
from Lawrence Park to Harbor
but
Island?
no, but I think that's part of what.
Same thing, but it's
That,
connected.
I think that's part of Neil's suggestion is to develop that plan. And, rather than, just do something, have a coordinated effort, identify and prioritize those types of approaches.
Okay, we have about 4 more minutes on
Can I
this.
come in?
Rob,
I wanna
I
make-
guess then I'll just take any more questions rather than I'll just, if there's any other questions, I think I have all these materials. I think maybe I could provide some responses in writing back. I think that could probably be a good way to do it, to respond to some of these things.
You know,
But yeah,
I have a question.
Mhm.
About the wayfinding system.
yeah.
A complete implementation of the village wayfinding plan. So my question number one is what remains to be done? And secondly, should this biking issue be incorporated into the wayfinding plan, something that Lou suggested, having, community, a route from parks to some other place. So can the wayfinding plan assist and provide more information for residents about biking? Is that something we can do?
Dan, I know there's the pedestrian system is part of it been built up, but what is the status of the implementation? Is it fully built out or is there more phases left?
We basically did the first phase. And at the time, the board didn't want to move forward with the additional phases, so.
Okay, do you know if that included any, I don't think it included any bicycle.
It was mostly kind of primary objectives and secondary and tertiary objectives for
Got it.
beach clubs.
Right.
uh,
So I think the answer to the question, yeah, I think, well, I guess there's a full plan. It's only been, phase 1 has been implemented. I think, so no, so there, from, as what Dan said, there isn't any bicycle sign, so that's an opportunity. I think sometimes that comes out of a bike plan is basic signage and routing, where you as part of it, because I think if you're going to put in any type of bicycle treatment, if it's a pavement marking, a lane, whatnot, usually there's going to be some signage associated with that. So I think that's probably what will be part of a bicycle plan. The fact that there exists a wayfinding sign, there could be some major routes. You could have some bicycle oriented signage built into the system. So yeah, those are all things that can be contemplated within a plan. Depends on the level of how far the plan goes. So
Incorporating into that plan, are we gonna be able to support the bikes that are currently on our avenues and streets as far as parking and storage? Currently, they're tied up to telephone poles and.
right.
Anything
Well,
that
right,
is.
I think bike storage frees those up and makes. it a
Right,
little-
so-
Yeah, but I think it, part and parcel of the plan would be
Right.
to identify what the existing issues are. And
Yeah.
so it would take that into account.
Rob wanted to say things.
I want to address this issue of reducing our time for a meeting to 90 minutes. And these are my thoughts. Number one, we have over 40 issues, traffic issues on our list that we still need to get to. At this meeting, we covered 5. In order for us to address all of the back issues, old business that we have, if we're limited to 90 minutes, we will never get to them. So it sounds to me that what we're doing is we're sacrificing the safety and welfare of residents who have traffic issues and safety issues for the sake of arbitrarily reducing our meetings to 90 minutes. I think it's laudable that eventually our meetings be reduced to a more reasonable time. I don't think we're at that point where we should consider doing that. And my recommendation is that we continue to have whatever time it takes for our meetings in order to address the large backlog of old business and safety issues that are the concern of residents, and not at this time accept a 90-minute arbitrary minute meeting. Those are my comments.
I delivered the consensus of the board. So I'm just delivering the message.
It was a request. You said it was a request.
I
Is
delivered
it
the
a demand?
consensus of the board is that the meeting should be no longer than 90
So
minutes.
what does everybody else
So I
think? Does everybody
wholeheartedly-
else think that we should stop in 90
No,
minutes, or do
I-
you want to consider what I just said?
I agree with you very much. I think that it's a request, but it's not a limitation. We don't have to. I think we've been doing this for a year. I've been on the board for years. I think 2 hours is a nice amount to do. I think an hour and a half is not enough. If it happens to work out, that's fine, but I feel like, there's a little pressure to do, maybe we can't expand on it. I was looking forward to this meeting with Neil, and I have a lot more, there's more questions. It's a big thing to discuss, and just to run through it for 10 minutes or 20 minutes is an
What does
example.
everybody else think about
it
the
just
time
really-
limit?
I like the 2 hours personally. I think it's a bit of a rush.
This is not the only meeting I go to. This is not the only organization I participate in. I don't have unlimited time. I work, I'm not retired. I have things that I have to do. You push this out to 3 hours and you're gonna have an empty
We're
seat.
not saying
No,
that at all. I don't
You
know
go
what
90
about.
minutes to 2 hours. We have still 200 items open. We're gonna be at 3 hours. You're gonna have an empty seat. I'm not
I'm not sure
threatening
where that's
anything.
coming from. Yeah.
I'm not trying, I have a
It's been
lot of,
90
I
it's
have
been
a lot
90
of,
minutes to 2 hours all along. Sometimes it's 2 hours and a quarter minutes.
I'm just saying there are other ways of plowing through that list
Yeah.
effectively and in a meaningful way that respects the points
Please,
they
please
made.
explain what those other ways that we can.
Well,
address them. I'd like to
I
hear
have
that.
a very successful charity. I'm on the board. And you walk into the meeting, the agenda's on the table. It's a 1-hour meeting. It's a 1-hour meeting. If there are issues that require additional attention, you break it out into a subgroup. Subgroup comes back to committee. We spend a portion of the meeting with the subgroup, reporting to the bigger group. But we just don't put an unlimited amount of time
Sure.
into these things.
And I think there is some concern over the recommendation that I'm hearing, and we have a lot to cover. But I also think that those limitations will help us be more efficient in dealing with some of these claims. And because these gentlemen from Knollwood have been waiting so patiently. And Neil, I know we want to spend more time with you. I know there's some more questions that we want to get to. But I also want to be respectful of you guys and your time.
Now, if you need to go longer tonight, just let us know. But I mean, what we want to keep the
Sure.
meetings to 90 minutes. And if there's a reason they have to go longer, note it.
So-
But
so-
what we don't want to do is drive off volunteers with meetings that never end.
Right. And so with you gentlemen from Knollwood, I think at some level, you're probably enjoying this conversation with Neil to decide, right?
I actually think what the gentleman, I'm sorry, I don't know what you said between the bike share, between parks, is
Yes.
probably a good idea. It's good for commerce
Would
too.
you be good enough to allow us to discuss with Neil for another 10 minutes?
Absolutely. So we appreciate your time. Right?
Okay, so let's go ahead and continue with Neil for another 10 minutes. Does that seem like reasonable, Rob, if we talk to Neil for a little bit longer? Because I know that you have some additional questions.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I wrote a few, actually, you answered some of my questions in the email, Neil, but you mentioned there was a 2017 consultant's presentation, kind of a Mamaroneck, and you gave me a link to that, but the link.
Yeah.
So if you could.
Oh, yeah.
It was WeTransfer thing. It must have gave me a week or two and I waited to do that. But
I
wasn't
think it was a big file. If it's not a big file, I'll just email it, but I think it was a big file, so.
very interested in those, particular bike routes and facilities and whatnot that we could, mimic or mirror what town. of Mamaroneck
Sure.
Village. And also, this is mentioned about how do we promote this movement towards reducing driving and using bicycles and whatnot among the mindset of the residents. We've always been residents of, this is almost a commuter town.
Right.
Parents have multiple kids to drop off. So and maybe Danny can be included, like how do we get that message out, like public information wise, to encourage people to bike more or to walk more? I mean, it's easy to say, and it's written in the plan, let's encourage that, but how we actually do that?
Yeah, I think I saw that question, and really there's no marketing message that's going to be strong enough. It's really constructing those, we use the technical term facilities, which means, making sure the crosswalks are there where they need to be, making sure the buttons on the traffic signals are, when you look at a place would be considered pedestrian friendly, you could see that the design of everything is geared towards the pedestrian. So, for example, yesterday when I came from the train and I was trying to find the button to cross Halsted Avenue after I got off the train, the button, I don't even know if it was working. It was like kind of half falling off. And then, and then when I get to the main intersection of the avenue in Halsted, I didn't even know where the signal was. It's way back there. I had to go and press the signal. And so, I think like I said, Mamaroneck is walkable intrinsically, but it's not pedestrian friendly. And so, whoever, I think that's like a state, I think that's like the county is responsible for some of those, but every detail of the pedestrian experience needs to really be for the pedestrian. And then, and same goes for the bike, for the bike experience. Once you lay out the facilities, whether it's a lane or whatnot, and people start to using it because it's there, it's you've created it. I think that's really the best way, is through delivering these physical things to people. And I think that's going to be the strongest thing. No marketing message will do that. I think some people obviously have the will already to do it, but they just want to feel safe. And I think everywhere you go, in every city, that's been the trend in the last 10 years is, wherever you're going, everything was designed for cars, and now you're chiseling away at that because people are now living more in downtowns, and so you have to re-engineer and redesign all these different parts of the town so that it caters to pedestrians and all. So,
well, like what Lou was saying about connecting park to park, it's promotion. How the Bronx River Parkway shuts down the road on a Sunday? Well, maybe Mamaroneck can shut a few roads down on a Sunday.
It's a good idea.
Biking, you shut down a path from Columbus Park to the harbor, and you have biking Sunday, and you introduce that, and you start culturing the community that we have this great new path, and we encourage you to do this, and giving them the opportunity to have that open space without having to fight the traffic that we have, that, sorry to say, isn't going to go away.
That's a great suggestion.
Building awareness.
Right.
Yeah, I think shutting down a lane. I saw a group of kids last Friday, probably 12 of them riding down in the middle of Mamaroneck Avenue.
Oh, there was a posse of them. They're from Portchester. They're true.
I love it because
They're fresh.
it showed that bike belong in our village, irrespective of.
I mean, that's
What-
what
They're a
bikes
bike club,
belong in traffic.
literally.
Yeah, bikes are traffic, and they were there.
What's the nickname for New Rochelle? The Pearl Long Island Sand or something?
Queen City.
We could become the pearl necklace of Long Island Sound, connecting all the parks,
That's right.
no. You could wear the necklace, Lou.
That's good. That's good.
The question I was gonna ask, one of the things that we're looking to do with the comp plan was incorporate the capital budget into the comp plan. And
Yeah.
I'm working on that right now, and, just over the next 5 years, I think 20 different traffic safety related projects.
Uh-huh.
Account stuff, which I know we're gonna do after that too, so, what's the process gonna be for that?
Well, I mean, typically now it's like, it would probably, the comp plan would inform the next year's capital plan probably, but what we did, I mean, we already have in the comp plan, just, I copied in at least the last 5-year plan we had and identified the elements that pertain to the section that it's in. I think I have an example here I think in the transportation chapter, if I'm still, I don't know, okay, let me just share my screen real quick here. But in the, where is that? Questions for decide. Here it is. So at the end of the chapter, there is this 2025 capital budget. And it's really more presenting information. And I think let's see. Well, this is what we have so far. I haven't looked at it in a while clearly, but is there an update to this that you're working on, the next?
Yeah, so I'm working on the capital budget right now. The department heads have sent me everything. And we're gonna be meeting with the board beginning January 30th, or the 31st? The last Monday of January. To, hopefully, work with the board to establish the capital priorities. Like I said, are you gonna do this would this be something you'd be doing just as one section, or should we look at for each section, capital projects related to that section as well, or?
Yeah, I think currently every chapter here has the
Okay, I see, yeah.
the related items from that. I sorted them so I created this. So chapter 9, I sorted them, I coded them each a chapter, because that's where they fit best. And
Okay.
there is some mentions. Yeah. So I did that for every section for that data that I had.
Yeah, okay.
Is the 30th.
Yeah, so we're working on this right now. We're meeting with the board on the 30th. Right now I have about 130 separate projects in there. All told, and I will say I have 20 that are related to traffic safety. in one
I certainly
fashion
hope that
or
the roundabouts are. in there.
Speed
all right,
humps,
Speed humps and
That's not-
roundabouts.
That's not,
residential parking.
that's not cap.
So,
It's either that must be all the ACE project is in there with a $7 million price tag on it.
More than that.
What?
so any final questions or?
I
or
wanted
comments?
to, I wanted to ask Neil a question I'd sent in email, which was obviously commuting patterns have changed considerably and Metro North down 30% and it's probably gonna stay that way for the foreseeable future. Does that affect any of the traffic planning for us?
It will. One thing that I thought was I did get data from Metro North since COVID. It's going to be in the comp plan where currently the old data is. So, but I think that's a question, and I'm sure you've posed that question, Dan, to Carmody. Have you posed that question already to Matt?
Yeah, so this came up, we were talking about the intersection you mentioned, the Halsted, North Bear, or Halsted, Mamaroneck. And I've actually applied for a grant to redo that intersection. And in the course of the conversation, I asked about what type of trends they've seen regarding the impact of work from home on commuting patterns. And it says, it's varied in a lot of places. It's varied based on a lot of factors. I thought that, our patterns probably were less because of the work from home. He agreed with that. How it will, impact us, and one of the things we're gonna have to look at is, we have, perfect parking, which, we are not selling out of right now because it's just the demand isn't there. So how are we gonna be looking at some of those parking resources that we have? Because, an unused parking space that we're not generating any revenue from isn't doing anyone any good.
Like grass.
So, yeah, I'm sensing that we don't have the pressure on commuter parking that we had pre-pandemic. In other words, even though some of it's come back.
Oh, no, yeah, I mean, I think you look at, we used to have the large Jefferson lot, the small Jefferson lot. I think the large Jefferson lot is about 66% full on a daily basis now.
Perfect place to put the bike racks. Absolutely.
Or residential parking.
What are we waiting for? Yeah.
All right, so I think it's the bikes are a great idea. I think that starting with, building this kind of awareness is something that we can start doing, sooner than later. This is just something that the trustees can say, let's close down a block and have a bike weekend in the fall or something, and just start building awareness slowly like that. I think and have people feel safe.
I think what you need is a framework to begin hanging this stuff on, and teams different parks. I mean, it would be a great thing to come up if we had a bike sharing thing. We did one in each park and connect the parks, and start with that, and then you can build around that.
And I was even gonna say the schools
Yeah.
do it now. That twice a year, once in the fall, once in the spring, it's just walk bike to school week. I'm sure that they would love it too.
Yeah, that was also one of my ulterior motives for trying to
Right.
get you more
I don't
involved.
like buying a
with
bike.
the School.
But I would like to Dunn Harbor, Alex, rather than take the car.
And there's a woman on Safe Routes to School who belongs to a bike group. I don't remember, do you remember? Her name is Carolyn Lee, but I don't remember the name of the group. I can maybe connect with her.
Yeah, and one of the things we've always found is that kids motivate the parents.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Motivate's a
100%
good word.
No, it's 100% true. The kids really want to do this stuff, and they bring their parents.
That's true. All right, well, super. Thank you so much, Dan, for all your expertise and insights.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate I thought that was a great idea to have a close the street thing, and I did look at the other comments, and I think some people have more recommendations about streetscapes. But yeah, if there's anything I can, I'll try to respond to in a brief way, to number one, either just acknowledge, or if there's a question that I haven't answered on the thing, I'll try to send a response back. So.
Thank you. I sent
Thank
the
you.
link email. I would love to hear your
Sure.
feedback.
Okay, thank you. I will.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
All right, good night.
Our Norwood friends, thank you for your patience. This was interesting, right?
I love it. It was great.
And it's not safe to bike from Millwood.
Safe to drive. But this is, I think this is pretty cool stuff. So, I know that we've been talking about this for a little bit now, where we've talked about some of the safety issues on Knollwood, right? That's on page 6. This goes back all the way to May of 21. And then again on January of 22, and then again August of 22, and here we are January of 23. And we're really talking about everything from stop signs to speed humps. I know Dan is going to do some looking at things, but it really centers around kids' safety and sort of the overall visibility around there. And what have you all been experiencing, Alex? What have you been seeing?
So my concern is that when I go from Norwood, whether I go left or right, I usually go left to get to Mount Kevin. I'm in a blind spot when I'm in at the stop sign. I'm in a blind spot for the Norwood drivers. They would see me. Yes, they would see me when they're at the intersection, which my understanding is less than a braking distance for the car, plus you need some moments to react.
Sure.
And I have multiple times where I'm standing on stop sign and start to roll, and people just swirl around me. So it was like close calls, and every time I cross, my heart's pounding. And it's just not safe for, like, if you forget about kids for a moment, just for the driver to drive, yeah. And he lives in Norwood, few houses, the third house down, and, you know, he experienced this
But you're talking about coming out of Crown Court.
coming out of Crown Court.
There
And
was
is
a
it
meeting that,
drivers coming down to Mamaroneck or up from the end?
Up from the right now.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Dan, there was one meeting that we talked about this, and I suggested that the house that's on the corner of Knollwood with the big rock, that maybe they could cut down some of the shrubs and trees. So you can maybe.
I don't
see
know,
better.
well, that house just is not occupied right now yet. It was recently.
So, I mean,
so think
yeah.
you might have-
It may not be, I mean, there is someone who is legally responsible for it.
There is somebody legally responsible. They're not in the home yet. It's also a rock. I don't, you're not gonna, you can cut trees.
It's
It's
not
still,
just
it's a
rock,
Siwanoy
yeah.
Indian rock. It was a Siwanoy, like,
Yeah.
from the native
If you could
times.
bring it up.
It's a 20,
Well,
50-foot rock.
It's almost like the
that.
rocking stone.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
I,
You're not gonna cut back and then.
well, no, I recall having a similar, a rock outcrop issue.
But I mean, I think.
Not
the-
in America.
Not the bigger thing though was that last month when I came to the meeting, look, I guess the word, and I love the word, geometrically challenging road, right? Coming up from Amerenik Avenue, up Knollwood, and then obviously there's Crown Court, there's Raleigh, and there's really nothing stopping the customer. They're coming up the hill from Amerenik Avenue onto Raleigh itself, and as Alex was saying, as when he comes out of Crown Court, there is a blind spot because there's a big rock, right? And then also too, there's nothing obstructing them too. So we kicked the idea, obviously Alex and I with some of the other neighbors, so we wrote to this commission about maybe stop signs. I don't think that was feasible. It was determined it wasn't feasible. Also, we spent speed humps. Now, at the last meeting, I know that I think a member of the board and Dan, you guys were going to meet and discuss the corner and take a look around. I don't know, have you guys met?
Well, no, because I mean, after the last meeting, I had gone on vacation the next day,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
And then, it's just when you get to New Year, it's a little.
So
different,
that's,
right?
so, because you had suggested too, where somebody had suggested to put something like
An island.
an island in the middle of it.
Yeah.
To slow traffic.
Yeah.
I mean, I
I
think
did it every
speed
time I
humps
drive.
are just maybe a speed hump would be a feasible, simple solution.
But do you really think people are speeding? I don't.
I don't think, I think
Yeah,
it's a geometrically challenging
Right, I
corner
think
for
it's
that.
just-
So how do we slow it down or make drivers more aware? There's more cars with deliveries and drivers are also more inattentive because the delivery guys are having.
And a lot of
phones,
construction.
And there's a lot of construction. So
Can you bring it up on the map?
Even if you're not speeding, I think, because.
Right, you don't have
it's a challenging corner.
That's why I don't know.
Yeah.
if it's supposed to do anything, because you're not, it's not.
Well, I think it would slow it down. I think even on Raleigh onto Knollwood would slow it down from Raleigh.
But I was just picturing like a small island after you
Yeah,
pass cross, so that it's more narrow and you kind of have to slow
it's a
down.
narrow.
And you're like drawing your attention to the
But now
center.
the area is wide, like that, I don't know.
We need an engineer to take a look at it.
Yeah,
Dan, I put that in the minutes that we were gonna ask Matt Harmony.
Yeah.
To come take a look at this particular spot.
So if that's coming up.
Hell of a hill.
Yeah, that's why I don't know.
Right, that's why you can't put a stop. sign.
Yeah, right, yeah, I think that's,
Back
it
up.
can't, has to be a certain distance from intersection, so it may not
Back
be
switch.
the area between Mamaroneck Avenue and Drury and
jury.
Crown, I mean, it may prevent.
So on your right is the big rock with all the trees and things behind it.
Right,
Right there.
it's a rock.
Mhm.
Behind that shrubbery
But I
is a
did
rock.
think if you cut
But-
down
But
the
if you-
trees on the
But if
corner.
you go, they were actually have been taken
Oh,
down.
they
Actually,
already
yes,
were.
I have a picture now which I took, which has no leaves, it's
Yeah,
winter
it-
time.
it-
So it's not any better, not much better than
If
this.
you go up just a little further, And just so
No.
we see, so
Then you
obviously you
go
have
back.
Crown Court on the
But they
right,
do.
going up, I'm going up Norwood, that's Crown Court on the right. There's nothing stopping a car, so when you go up
See
and then
those
not the
are-
street, the next street is Raleigh, the left-hand turn. There's nothing stopping the cars, they're coming off from Marinick Avenue, right? And then that left-hand turn is just unobstructed, you just keep going on to Raleigh.
So Dan, like right there where the name of the street was on the street is where I was envisioning an island. If you go back,
Like around here.
no, if you go
Well,
back a little.
Or back farther. Like right when you top, right
In,
there.
right after you pass,
Jury.
well, Jury and
I
Crown
think
Court,
if you-
right, like right where the name is written in the middle of the street.
Right.
Like a strip.
A skinny
Yeah.
island.
And the rocks on the right-hand side there. But that's without the,
And actually, this picture is a little better. Normally, there's all cars parked, which makes it even harder on that.
Well, the thing is, I mean, if you put something in the road, you'd have to definitely
Make no
restrict
parking.
parking.
Well, there kind of should be no parking there anyway.
I think on
because
that side
our-
of the road, there's.
Yeah, there's
so-
no
so there's
parking.
parking.
It doesn't reflect how steep it is.
If we,
Well, over there, it's not steep.
It's
Down
not, it's
So we
not.
have-
there it
Making a
levels.
right turn coming down that hill. I wonder if
Deadly.
I'm gonna
if we
fall.
had a village-wide program of installing islands, traffic islands, I mean, how many of those do you think that we could do?
Oh, I tell it could be a lot, and it'd be expensive. I mean,
Belgian block.
I have to, before we have our capital.
What, just want a speed hump at the top of that hill, or a speed hump on Raleigh coming on, back on to Norwood.
So, again, I don't know what I haven't reviewed, I don't know if I have the accident history, I don't know what the speed data is like. I can certainly,
But when you're saying an accident history, are we waiting for an accident to merit the application of something that just makes sense?
well, if there have been no accidents, and we put something out there that decreases the side of the road, or decreases with the roadway, and causes someone to have an accident. I mean, is that,
A speed hump would cause an accident?
what you're talking about the traffic on?
I'm not talking about- I'm talking speed.
Traffic engineering is, you deal with what you know is happening, not
Okay.
not what you can envision.
I almost think
I
that,
can't protect, we can't protect people.
Yeah, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah.
I wanna say something about the island. If you put an island there, it's my opinion, it's gonna push the cars towards the right of the street, and those cars will not see because of this rock, they will be obstructed even more, the visibility of the Crown Court. So I don't think island in this particular case would work.
I say, when it comes to traffic engineering, you try to make decisions based on the relevant information, which includes, again, what the existing conditions are, what type of accident history is, what the observed speeds are, what there are other factors that go into that. So I try to be a little conservative when it
we've
comes
been
to.
talking about this now for like 18 months, right?
We've been this since last March. But I'm wonding, could we get Matt Carmody or our contractual to go over this?
I can ask him to take a look at it,
Right.
but
We talked about it.
without knowing, we'd have to, I think he'd want to understand what the data shows over there.
So why can't we just show them the information from what we have?
Well,
Like our minutes and.
Well, no, there are minutes, but, I don't know what type of.
Again, we're citizens, we're coming, like, we think there's a problem, we're not, we understand that what we're asking for is a way to perhaps slow this corner down, make drivers a little more aware.
No, but what I'm saying is, if you're gonna ask an engineer to look at it, he's gonna have to say, okay, this is what it looks like, what is happening out there? What is the,
Study that.
what's the data that demonstrates the problem that you're asking me to solve?
Well, you could also ask me, just take a look at it and say, how would you improve this?
That's what I said. Yeah, maybe I took the minutes wrong, but I thought that was what we resolved, what we decided last time.
Well, no,
That we would decide to contact.
Yeah, but again, that was, as I mentioned, that we met on December 11th.
No, I'm not saying we should have done by now, but.
Yeah.
Engineers do that, though. Just go
I mean,
go and look,
just to
and
take
say,
a look.
this intersection be improved, make it more safe.
Well, I think he'd wanna just have a general idea of what is happening out there.
Well, I don't.
Just stand there and take a look, and just say,
Dan,
you're an engineer, look at the intersection.
I think the biggest, you can tell me if I'm wrong, the biggest problem, I think, safety wise, is you can't see when you're coming out of
Yes.
Crown Court. I know we said no to a mirror somewhere else, but could you maybe put a mirror?
So-
So, because they can't, if you're coming out of Crown Court, you cannot see who's coming up the hill.
So if I can explain it in terms of, there have been, concerns raised about the overall, visual obstructions, whether they be, natural through rock outcrops or, man-made by people not maintaining their properties. Like I said, it's also generally a wide intersection. It's not tight, like it's not a, two straight roads intersecting with
Right.
one another.
But it's a curve below it.
Well, that's why I say it's not two straight roads intersecting with each other. I mean, that's, so, I can present it that way, see what his
So,
thoughts
I mean,
are.
at least that will help the people coming out of Crown Court because it's very, I mean, I'm sensitive to it, so I always go up slow because I know somebody might be coming out, but most people don't, and it's very hard to see.
Again, it's more car on the road with Amazon, with different packages, so trucks that aren't familiar.
Yeah.
And again, too, all we're asking for is just to slow it down a little, that's all. If there's, I think a speed hump couple speed humps would do the trick.
How much does the speed hump
Then-
cost?
I don't know the answer. I can find the answer, I just don't know.
Three bags of concrete.
We wouldn't
Oh.
put speed humps until we get a recommendation from engineers, is that how it works, or do we have the authority?
Well, but let's have them look at it first to see.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I think, let's see what the issues are and what the recommended approaches are.
I'm saying we have the issues already.
Stop
Well,
sign.
no,
Gotta get
well,
more
it's-
data, that's why we need more data to present to the engineer.
I don't think we
That's
have,
my
I don't think
question.
we have any data.
Well, we have, this
No, but-
information that Robert put together and the summaries and the.
No, but that's a summary of what has been
Talked about.
talked about, but it's
Right.
not necessarily, actual observation of what's happening out there.
Well, I live there, there's observation.
No, no, but I mean,
That's not, that's not observation.
Again, I don't want to take. You guys
Great.
Okay.
Just tell me more important.
Yeah.
Okay, in other words,
We're saying that we're waiting for accidents to happen, and we the people are saying, no, we don't want an
Well,
accident.
that's like.
That there's a problem.
I think I've seen them in Europe.
Yeah.
like,
I think that the biggest, I think that the biggest conversation is that everything has changed.
And, I can't prevent,
If you don't wait for things to happen, bad things to happen.
but I can't protect someone from themselves.
could you speak to the?
You're not asking you. I'm
Yes,
asking
that's
to-
what we're gonna do.
Because this is not gonna move forward, that's right now.
Yeah, I agreed. So Richard brings up a good point. I mean, we had a little bit of a break with just the holidays and stuff. I mean, clearly, everybody on this committee is knowledgeable what's happening and remains concerned. You guys are here, we're here. I mean, this is an issue, but it requires engineering just because it's not an easy solution. I mean, if speed humps are possible, then I think that we need to have an engineer tell us how that's done.
Speed humps or traffic calming or anything.
And we just, but we need to really have an engineer. I mean, is there a way, Dan? I mean, I know that there's always a list for these guys to look at, but is there a way to kind of expedite? I mean, this has been in front of this committee for 18 months.
Well, so as far as, talking with our engineer, the request for that came up at the last meeting.
Okay.
So that was again, December.
Sure, no,
we don't know.
So, I just haven't had a chance to follow up.
Okay, so let's,
Follow up and report back, and get it going.
and even if do you think we can maybe get some, because I know you've done this a couple other times where you're able to, move something, forward more quickly than not. I mean, is there a chance that you could get out there in the next 30 days or 60 days?
Yeah, but definitely that.
Okay, in the next 30 days.
Yeah,
60 days.
I mean, as long as there's not some massive snowstorm that fast.
Okay. so-
Stay positive, stay
As long as we don't turn the.
We can make it.
I can assure you, he's got other things.
I think that is equipment. Okay.
We appreciate it.
We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hey, Ryan,
I'm just talking to Robert.
questions.
Wondering
Mike up
if
there.
the most
No,
easiest
not anymore.
Start.
Barely push baby.
I get it.
You used to walk up that hill because my cousin lived on the.
Plenty of locations that people say
Like it was. that-
slow in
No,
drive,
we would drive up that hill.
slow, blind intersection.
Yeah,
A
but
simple,
Is it-
there's a cautionary, the cautionary sign in the picture there, but I can't read it that well. It says
Ask the
children's
engineer.
crosswalk.
Yeah.
What harm would it be as your first move to put up a cautionary, yellow cautionary sign saying blind intersection ahead? Slow.
is there a blind intersection?
Would that work?
How
The
would
word
it-
blind intersection, slow, like you do, I've seen plenty
So
of driveways.
as
like
far
that.
as what's in the MUTCD.
That's the thing I can't be in.
Yeah, I mean,
Can't
but
be in
there-
Rocco, it's gotta be in the MUTC.
Yeah, but I mean, there are
My concern-
thousands
Of
of
tools.
My concern would be, you put in one cautionary sign, no matter what the engineer tells
Well,
you, nothing's gonna happen. You solve your problem, you're done. You got.
So
Get
that's.
the engineer to look at it.
I
report
agree.
back, and then
You don't get
we
it
have
right.
thought.
Pieces of the way,
Right,
you're done.
no. Get it fixed.
So we're going exponential. It's not your own. Streets and what's
It's one of those times that I see
So, is there a motion to approve December 11th? Make a motion.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Rob Stark, the motion to accept events as Richard,
Second.
excellent minutes.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I had some, wow, you
Richard seconded.
guys are gonna kill me. I just have one important
Richard
thing.
seconded.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Just 1 minute. It's for Lieutenant Gata, if I could ask a question. I'm been trying to wrap my head around who issues the parking tickets. So I know there's two parking enforcement officers. I guess AK, okay. four.
Yeah.
Now, do police officers issue parking tickets as well, or just moving violations?
Moving and parking.
And parking. So, that's this question. What priority is it, or what priority is it that the police department issues the tickets? Is it like, it depends on how busy they are, because.
It depends on many factors, but one being how many emergency call are given there. It's not necessarily the highest priority with parking tickets, because we do have plugged in, especially for
Okay.
for Monday to Friday.
Okay, so I was at the Christmas party, I was talking to someone of influence. I mean, I would love to propose to double the amount of parking officers. Mr. Young, double the amount of parking.
Goes away.
I mean, because what's central to this commission is that we're making the laws, we're putting mandates, we're suggesting crosswalks and stop signs and taking away parking spots, but if it's not gonna be enforced,
Do you know what the
we're
cost
wasting.
is?
Besides, I'm doing theoretical.
Four salaries,
Okay,
four pensions.
maybe one more, but I'm just saying
Four sets of benefits.
theoretically,
He's gonna have a heart
I'm
attack.
talking
Put that in his
but
budget.
theoretically,
I think
half
there
our
is
problem is the
a
lack of.
proposed for increase for next year, I was told, because we had the same problem with Parks and Rec.
See, I've been on this commission for a year. Sometimes I feel like, what's the purpose if we're gonna say, okay, remove the parking spot, let's turn the meters off. I mean, what are we doing if we're not, the enforcement?
We're trying to get you.
Well, so I mean, I can answer,
Theoretically, that's gonna be.
yeah, I can answer your question that every parking enforcement officer, I think they top out around 66,000. So that's their salary. The benefit rate is about 80%. So that's another basically 100,000.
I want to agree theoretically that it's a, to me,
No, it-
it's a problem.
Yeah.
of Us doing our job as volunteers.
But you can, as a commission, make a recommendation to the board that you feel that the village needs additional parking enforcement officers. I'm sure that would help the chief to say she needs them too, if she wants to.
Right, that's what we suggested.
Yeah.
I mean, it is an issue that is completely overlooked, and that is enforcement is an issue, and their hands are tied because there are not enough
of them to go around.
Right, and they're focused
You
on
know?
Mamaroneck Avenue,
They're-
not the Washingtonville district.
Or any district within, it's just that Washingtonville, you have Rhinebeck and, traffic isn't going anywhere.
They're each assigned to a
We're talking about
location.
parking though.
So it's not that they're not covering certain areas, but it's.
I'm not saying I'm gonna jump, I'm like,
Mhm.
this
We're
was kind of.
we're at the tail end of this is what this group
Sorry,
does the best.
a follow-up to your suggestion, instead of increasing the number of code enforcement officers, increasing the parking code violation fees. And this goes back, I'd like to have Dan, because Dan has recommended a wonderful book about parking. And I've read it, and I hope everybody gets a chance, understanding about free parking. And that when you set the penalties for violating code, you affect the
Psyche.
yeah, the
behavior.
the
Behavior.
behavior, yes. So could you comment on whether you think increasing parking penalty fees would be a worthwhile thing to do?
It's a win-win.
Well, I mean,
No, if you.
so.
We're exactly correct.
In like the last 2 years, I mean, the last time we looked at it, I mean, our fine schedule is comparable to what most municipalities have nowadays. We're not New York City, we're not charging $200.
But can you talk about the idea
Oh.
of controlling parking behavior?
You don't
And
put
being
value on something,
Yeah.
people will have no value up for it.
Being comparable and being profitable and productive are two different things.
Well, so.
You could be
I-
comparable, but not issue those tickets, so you're not bringing the revenue in and you're not solving the issue.
I have never looked at parking enforcement, parking meters as a revenue item. The purpose of charging for parking is to encourage turnover. Because, this is, we want a thriving municipal center. We have a lot of shops that require turnover in their customers. They're not banks, they're not salons, they're not real estate offices. These are places that survive on the $25 to $100 sale as opposed to anything larger than that. But the book that Robert's referring to is there was a urban planner's name is Donald Shoup, and his book was called The High Cost of Free Parking. And I would always summed it up as like Lou said, when you place no value on your parking, people treat it as if it has no value. So that's always been my approach, is that we place the value so people treat it with value, and it's part of the urban center to make sure that we have a thriving urban center.
So parking meters for social modification.
Yeah.
Make
That's
us all better, make
yeah.
us all better people.
But there needs to be some sort of a medium going forward, because if our village is going to continue to grow, we have parking programs that residential parking example that need code enforcing
Yeah.
24/7.
Well, here's what I'm gonna suggest to you. That this commission its purpose is to advise the Board of Trustees. You tell the Board of Trustees, there's a problem with not enough parking enforcement. That's a big problem. We'll figure out.
We've said
All right,
that.
all right, all
We
right.
addressed that, Mayor.
Okay.
Is there, does someone want to make a motion to deliver a clarion message to the Board of Trustees that there is an issue with parking?
I second that motion.
enforcement?
Well, you gotta make it. Someone
Yeah.
else wants to do it. No, he's asking.
I am making a motion for the commission to put forth a letter to make it known that parking enforcement is lacking.
With horns if necessary. Clarion message.
I mean, the wording would be better.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Who's gonna do that letter, but we'll figure that out.
Yeah, we're gonna vote.
Yes,
And
can I,
So you're making a motion that the board.
is there
needs to-
any,
That the commission. motion that-
all those in favor?
Aye.
Hey,
It's just a
any
question of whether it's gonna-
opposition?
Oh, no, we've covered this. Let's just, let's go.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
It's pending. I made it earlier.
Yes, I heard you.
I
You
repeat,
made it,
but
Richard, there's a motion, to adjourn, from Richard, is there a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Absent.
Yeah. 10 minutes.
Well,
Not get the whole.
Well, that was it.
Sorry.
You
that's-
revised the.
several sources.